Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we have behind me a Z3M and M3 CSL. About the only thing they share is the S54 engine, and with the S54 engine you get issues with the VANOS units. Today I have Steve from Mr VANOS down here to discuss with us what goes wrong with these units and how he solves the problem with his rebuilt VANOS units. Steve, welcome back to the channel, also known as Mr VANOS. So you may have seen Steve from our previous video on the rebuild of the S63 TU engine, and today you're going to be treating our S54s to some rebuilt VANOS units. So anyone that's been around S54s knows that this has always been an issue, even when the car's relatively new. Yeah. So do you want to give us a brief breakdown of what the issue is and how it's rectified?
A lot of people think it is down to just the unit itself, which it isn't. There's so many things with these cars, particularly S54 over an S50 E46 engine. Timing chain guides break, VANOS oil pump drives snap tabs off. The timing chains are an issue where they're stretching now, and that does cause quite a lot of noise between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM. Generally speaking, you've said these cars fine, they make good power, and there's always something. Even people are just having them done now because of the values of the cars. I want it done as preventative. You can get an invoice to say it's been done for future, and there's always something you find broken. Always.
Yeah, so driving wise, I mean, I don't have a brand new one to compare them against, but as far as my memory serves me, they do drive fine, and we've had both of them on the dyno and they make the power that I would expect them to. Yeah. But yeah, without having a new car as a reference, it's very difficult to tell, and if you have an issue that's running over time, you're not going to notice that, because it hasn't suddenly failed or anything. It's not performing to the best that it can be.
No, the thing that, unless you've got an engine management light on, then that, for a VANOS solenoid fault, then it will lose power. But generally speaking, the things that people notice is just how drivable they are. Yeah. So the town driving and the way the pickup is as well. So they always make the top power. It's just how it gets there and how smooth they are. On an SMG car, you notice a little bit of jerkiness, just you haven't got a clutch to set off smoothly. And that generally does go when you start resetting everything back to how it was factory fresh. So, you know, seals are tight, timing chain's not moving around because it's stretched, and just back to how it should be from new, basically.
Cool. So we can't actually see a lot with the VANOS units in the car, so let's get one of them out, stripped out, and take a close look.
Yep.
So Steve, you've stripped the car, you've taken the VANOS unit out. What have you found?
To be honest, what we'd normally expect to find, the car has had a new VANOS unit at BMW, presuming when it was approved used, 2007. The inlet camshaft timing was quite a bit out. It was probably 7-8 degrees. Without measuring it exactly, it's hard to say. Yeah, but it's kind of a guess, and we know roughly where it is. We do have quite a bit of slack in the timing chain, which is obviously more and more of a thing we're seeing lately. So at the minute, we have the timing chain tensioner wound in one thread, and we have this slack. When the new chain's on, you'll see the difference, that we can't actually get the tensioner in one thread, it's that tight. So most of the noise that comes between, I would say, 3,000 and 4,000 RPM on this engine, the metallic sort of harsh noise, comes from the timing chain moving around. The knock-on effect of that is as well that the time is not quite right. It's always trying to catch up with itself because the
Yeah.
chain's longer than it thinks it should be.
Okay.
So that's that.
So does that make more of a difference to the drivability of the car then, in terms of going from park to full throttle? Yeah, okay.
That's the drivability probably. The top end power, like, you know, it's making good power. Yeah, it's fine. So the drivability comes from the time and just trying to catch up with itself all the time. So putting a new chain on, the new timing chain guide, which is there, and there's a little bit of wear on it. It's surprising it hasn't snapped, but it's still worn probably halfway through. And again, another common thing with this car. But now, yeah, put the new chain on and back together.
Okay, cool.
So we've had a brief chat with Imran about the specifics with this particular car, what's wrong with it and what we found. Now we'll have a quick overview of the units themselves. This is the one that came off the car. It's a 2007 one. You can tell it's 2007 by the date stamp for one, but the main reason is to have some Torx headed bolts in here. BMW as a group in 2006-07 decided to use Torx bolts over Allen key bolts, and it's purely for the process of technicians in a workshop. It's much harder to round a Torx bolt off in theory than it is to do an Allen key. That leads us on to cam gear bolts. That's one out of the car, which is the original 2003 cam gear bolt. It's the one that everyone sees snapped or worn or coming loose. Now there's a bit of a myth with these where BMW or people claim they've made an uprated bolt with a Torx headed bolt into it. It's not. It's basically in around 2006-07. Again, all BMW bolts change across all cars to a Torx bolt, but the actual spec of the bolt is still an 8.8 mild steel bolt, tensile strength. So what we actually use is a stainless steel marine grade screw. That particular stainless steel screw is the same as an E46 M3 cam gear bolt, and the chain wheel and the actual fit into the end of the cam is exactly the same as an E46 M3. Everyone knows these don't come loose on an E36, just doesn't happen. The reason they use those on a 36 is to have the cam pickups on the end of the chain wheel, and if it was magnetic like that would, then it would pick up a false cam reader. So here we have our rebuilt unit. It's visually the same as any other unit. It is just essentially a reconditioned part. We have new bolts in it, some plastic covers, and obviously the most important part is the Mr VANOS plaque. It says it's been done by us. A couple of small things we do differently. Oil pump drive, well-known issue with this is those tabs break off. The reason for that is a 10mm tab across the width there, and the holes are 11mm. For whatever reason, BMW decided that. Earlier cars use a very similar drive and they have a 10mm hole in the oil pump. So whether it's an oversight and a design oversight, we don't know. We did used to sleeve them, and on a perfect condition oil pump, we still think it's a good way of doing it, but with the oil pump that's got some damage in the sides, the sleeves can move, so we started drilling them a few years back now, and that solves the issue of the tabs breaking. Once that hole matches the size of that, it stops any oscillation, which then basically shears the tab off through there, and that stops that happening. Second thing is, we've started using brand new BMW solenoid packs. Anyone that follows our Instagram page will see that we put this up a few weeks ago. We're having loads of issues with these being repaired elsewhere, and once they've been repaired a certain way, they can't be repaired again. So we've had a few issues of having to travel out to cars. Obviously we offer warranty on all our work, and we've had to go back and fit new solenoid packs at quite a cost. So the theory now is to basically fit new ones. These should last 10, 15, 20 years, if not more now, because the cars just aren't doing those miles. The plus side is, in terms of what we offer people now, we're offering a 5-year warranty on the units and the fitting and the parts, including the new solenoid. And it does mean the cost has risen ever so slightly, but that's, you know, the benefits outweigh the cost. So we thought we'd strip this unit down just to show people what's inside of it. You can instantly see from the last video we did with the E36, there's a lot less moving parts in it, a lot simpler unit. We'll start here, the same setup with the spline gears. They're essentially the same, they're a slightly different design, different lengths, but they do the same job, helical cut. As with the E36, we don't do anything with the bearings in here. There's no reason to be honest. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever, and we are still taking loads of these cars apart that have previously been done with this anti-rattle kit. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference, you know, it's not the cause of noise on this engine. Move on to the oil pump. We've obviously talked about the holes. This is another thing which BMW obviously modified from the E46. It's a metal ring that goes over there. That lives inside of here where the bearings are, and the E36 had a plastic ring and they were prone for breaking up and falling out, and also the needle bearings would fall out. Next thing, 2 pistons. Very simple on these. They haven't got the complicated setup with different shafts and sleeves and various other parts. It's just 2 pistons with some composite rings on. We changed these for our own style of composite ring, a little bit harder material, slightly better underneath, but generally speaking, they don't really go wrong, completely honest. They just get tired of the edge and the compress, and if you just look there, you can see some sort of polish marks on the edge of the piston where it's been wound up and down the bore. Occasionally, if they've been apart before, we see corners snapped off where they haven't been fitted properly on both sides, but other than that, generally not much issue. That piece there is the feed from the cylinder head into the VANOS unit. That actually feeds oil direct from the oil filter housing straight into here. Next part we have, similar setup to an E36 again, is the diaphragm springs. They live in the back of here. What we do with these ones is put the E39 M5 springs in. That tightens everything up and also keeps a bit of the noise down from the gears. The downside with doing this on, and it's not so much on a road car because it keeps them nice and quiet, but on a race engine we tend not to do with the S52 springs. It does slow the reaction time down ever so slightly. On a race car with big cams in it, revving hard and living at high RPM on a track, it's probably best to leave the original ones in and keep the reaction time up. But road cars, you don't notice any difference, it's fine. Next thing, we have the solenoid pack. This does the job of controlling the pistons moving in and out of the unit, effectively doing that, which is adjusting the cam time. This unit is self-contained. It does mean it's expensive to replace. The old E36 had 2 ports, 2 bores if you like, with wiring and solenoids that are all separate. This does the whole thing in one unit. They are troublesome. They do cause engine management lights and lack of power or misfiring at idle. The sealing plate which lives here, that is the join between the solenoid and the bottom of the unit. So that just basically interfaces between the two. We still use the original BMW seals. There's nothing wrong with that plate. They don't fail, they don't cause any issues. It is a more expensive way of doing it, but it just works, and it's worked for the life of the car so far, so why change it? We can supply the seals that fit in there and cut them out. It's a fiddly, time-consuming job. The seals are about £1 as well, you know, they're not expensive, but that sealing plate's nearly 30 quid now, but it's a lot easier just to replace the sealing plate, and it's done properly, and there's no reason to change it whatsoever. And that's basically what an E46 VANOS unit looks like. There is very little to it. It is quite simple. There's a few failure parts. Most of the noise with this engine does come from the timing chain. It comes from these plates can wear a little bit. It comes from the cam gear bolts that can wear through and snap, and they can allow the cam gear to wobble, and that creates the VANOS noise, which sounds very similar to an E36, but it's a different cause. And the timing chain guides can snap. Have a closer look there. They generally break through here as a rule, where that wear point is. The newer ones are ever so slightly different in shape. They're a little bit stronger. We did experiment making some solid timing chain guides, but we found that we couldn't find a material that was as good as this on the running face, and we found that after a couple of thousand miles there were some tracks running down there from the timing chain, so we decided against it. The reason, I mean, they've lasted for a long time now. This car's nearly 20 years old, 70,000 miles, and it's still in good condition, so realistically these cars are never going to see over 70,000 miles, so there's no reason to go back and sort of reinvent it. After this now we'll fit the new unit to the car, fit the new timing chain and put the car back together.
Steve, you fitted both cars with your Vanos unit. Did you find anything to report back to me?
Yep, the CSL first, we saw the timing was out on the inlet camshaft by quite a bit. That's now rectified, set the timing properly. The timing chain was stretched as usual.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it's in good condition inside, but this is the one I think you'll notice the most different with.
Okay.
This had the timing out, a little bit of oil pressure loss on the inlet side as well. I could see that the way the cam was moving when I was turning it by hand. So I think that's the one you'll notice the most.
Okay, and the Z3M?
Z3 had a new Vanos unit again, both at B&W. This one had been done properly, so the timing was perfect on it when we checked it, which is good. The cam gear bolts had been Loctited in, so we left them in rather than trying to damage them, getting them back out. And obviously, all we were going to do is replace them with some new ones and Loctite them back in. So the fact that that had been done properly made it a bit easier. Out of the two, that's probably the nicer engine, but generally speaking, the CSL's got driven harder. Yeah. So there's a bit more.
Which is what you'd expect. So yeah, just for reference, both of these cars have basically 69,000 miles on them, and they both had full BMW service history before they came to us. So they've had the same kind of service history from new. Yeah. And same, roughly the same owners as well. So they're very similar in that regard.
It's just a different guy buys a Z3 that buys a CSL.
Yeah, this
CSL's
is more,
a track car.
Yeah, this is going to get driven a lot gentler than that one for sure. Okay, Steve, your work is done here. Thank you very much. I'm really curious to see what difference it's made on the CSL, because as I said before, we were happy with the power, but I'm curious to see how it's improved the drivability. Cool. With the rebuilt Vanos units from Mr VANOS, let's go take it for a drive and see what it's like. I can tell you right off the bat that the sound is very different. It sounds a lot smoother on idle. It was quite noisy before, but unless you have a reference point, you don't realize what you're looking out for. But yeah, straight away I can tell the car from park to mid throttle there, especially between 2 and 3, the car feels a lot smoother and eager to rev. At the top end it feels about the same, I think, and as I said before, we did dyno the car and it was making the power we expected. It just seems a lot more responsive, especially in the low to mid range, which is what Steve said we would experience. Sorry, just gonna enjoy that wonderful sound. Yeah, so it's definitely made a positive difference low down. So if I'm sort of at 2,000 to 3,000 and I put my foot down, it just feels much more eager to pick up, and it's definitely smoother. Yes, and I know that trim has fallen down again. We haven't had a chance to fix it, but we will do it at some point. So if you've owned a car for a long time, I think it's one of those things that gradually gets worse, and you probably wouldn't realize until you were next to a car that had recently had the Vanos unit rebuilt. And I wasn't really expecting that much difference in the way the car drove, but much smoother, much more eager to rev, especially in the low to mid-range RPMs. And I know I've said it before and it's probably getting boring now, but this car is so good. If I had one word to describe it, it would be fluid. The chassis engineers at M did an absolutely epic job on this car. Remember, this car, suspension-wise, is completely stock, and I do not feel the need to change it for road use whatsoever. Sorry, I know this video is meant to be about the Vanos, but just listen to it. Okay, I'm having way too much fun, so on that note, I'm going to sign out. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, please remember to smash that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. If you want to join the conversation, please drop a comment below and we'll try our best to respond to you. If you want to watch more of this project, you can do so over here. If you want to watch what YouTube thinks you might like from our other content, you can do so over here.